Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of Water Talks. We're going to be talking about how you can elevate your water operations with powerful data analytics, really concentrating on our operational analytics platform, Info360 Insight.
All right, that's my cue. Hold on. There we go.
We need baseball signals, like the pull of the ear, something. Really excited today to be joined by Pete McIntosh, who is the Senior Product Manager for Info360 Insight. My name is Hunter Sparks, and I'm a Solutions Engineer, both of which on the Innovize team over here at Autodesk. And so just laying some ground rules, whether this is your first water talk or you've been to a ton of them, really the goal is to create a community where you guys can come and ask questions. We'll provide you answers, give advice, offer insights where we can. Really, we like this to be really a two-way communication, so feel free to ask questions at any point. We do like to point out at the bottom there is a Q&A and a chat. Please provide your questions in the Q&A section. The chat we will not be monitoring, as well as we can't follow up afterwards. And always like to start off the top saying, because this is a question we typically get, will this session be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded, and usually we can send this out for distribution afterwards. And then some additional notes: Water Talks are still Tuesday at 12 Eastern, as you can see if you're here today, but now we've moved to an every other week cadence. Some upcoming ones that we're really excited about: on the 23rd, we're going to be talking about the New World Order for California, how to prepare your response to new requirements for Info360 Asset, as well as looking at surge analysis within Info Water Pro on September 7th. That one is actually going to be on a Wednesday, I believe it is, because it's right after the Labor Day holiday. So please join us for those if you can. And with all that introduction, Pete, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you.
Beautiful. Sounds good. Okay. Title of today's webinar: Info360 Insight, Driving Smarter Water Decisions. So we are going to be talking about some water-specific business intelligence, operational performance tools that we have with Info360 Insight. What we're going to do is, however, start off with a very first poll question. I've got a couple of poll questions that we'll throw out today. First one is what BI tools do you use that show how your systems are performing relative to expected operating ranges? I think Hunter's going to pull the trigger and launch the poll. And there we go. So we'll let this go and see how I don't know if the dashboards update in real time or if, oh, there we go, starting to come in. So yeah, the options that we see out there of what people are doing is when they're trying to do system analytics, maybe it's a water audit, maybe it's just some monthly compliance reporting, maybe it's just water quality reports that they issued out to the community on a regular basis. All of these, of course, right, take data not data manipulation, but data processing, data amalgamation to get into compliance ready analyses, or report ready analyses, or dashboarding ready analyses. And so seeing here, it looks like most of us are using either just a generic BI solution with kind of a homegrown data infrastructure. But there are a lot of people, a lot of utilities or nodes out there that really, they don't do anything, right? If they need to analyze some data, if they want to do pump station analytics, if they want to say, out of my my 80 pump stations or so, here's what the weekly throughput is, here's what the pump runtime is at each one of those, here's what my pump cycles look like. And so on. So, okay, this is just a good data point to kind of get us all on the same page. And I will let Hunter, do I need to do anything after share results?
Nope, you're good to go. I believe I stopped sharing, so hopefully they're back to seeing the PowerPoint.
Beautiful. Okay. So interesting, right? Just to set a baseline for what we're all doing. Just a little bit of foundational stuff. I haven't been in front of this audience in some time, and so I want to set a little bit of a again a baseline of why we want business intelligence, why we want operational analytics for utility, and it it comes down to, right, sort of maximizing my operational efficiencies, minimizing my waste, and there's a lot of things that go into both of those things, right? When we're talking about minimizing waste, for clean water, for water distribution, right? It's really all about come down to how do we minimize any non-revenue water, right? Even or even any non-planned water. That's finding either leaks in the system, that's finding potentially water theft, that's finding wherever you have inefficiencies and you are losing water in your water distribution time. So we are looking at things like how do we predict a service failure? You know, how would you do that today, right? How would you answer that question today? Insight helps you answer those questions with tools like our non-revenue water tools. If you start to see those trends growing over time, or if you start to see the leakage indices growing over time, you know that you have problems that are arising in your utility. You're also going to want to know where that is, right? If you can do system-wide tools that help you know your overall performance, but it's obviously much more useful if you can pinpoint the location. That uses a concept called DMAs, or district meter areas. We talked about that in a previous webinar, and I think we'll revisit that topic in a future webinar. But that's just breaking your network down either into actual physical sections or virtual sections where you can monitor the total inflows, outflows, and storage deltas, which give you just a more localized view of water loss throughout your system. And so on and so forth. We could go at great length on all of these, but for the sake of time, I'm going to keep it pretty short. In the wastewater and stormwater solution, right, really what you also want to do is get into an efficiency standpoint. You want to reduce your pumping costs when and however you can, if possible. Optimize the use of storage. You know, particularly in this area, you want to minimize infiltration and inflow, right? You don't want to pump water that you shouldn't be pumping, or you don't want to treat water that you shouldn't be treating, because you've got inflow or infiltration into your system. So our tools are also aligned to give you optics into how parts of your system are performing relative to those key metrics. So just a few questions that I think are good to ask ourselves when we're having this conversation. And you think about, wouldn't it be to your advantage to start looking at fully integrated solutions that do incorporate your modeling, your asset management, and your business intelligence dashboards, right? That's the largest vision of what Info360 is, when we have asset modeling and analytics dashboards. Wouldn't you want a solution that can always pull real-time information for your set points and patterns, to establish the most trustworthy outcomes in your simulation and modeling tools, right? One click, bring my data across, here's all my set points, here's all my live boundary data, here's my pattern information. Info360 is purpose built to do that and to work seamlessly with our modeling tools. But even just in a more generic analytics sense, wouldn't it be useful to have live dashboards that are available to all? Everybody has a common operating picture. Everybody has visibility into the dashboards. Everybody has clear optics, from the finance people to the operational people to the maintenance people to the planning people, into what exactly is going on today and what has happened before. And ultimately to get to a place where you're making the best operational and planning decisions in the future. And then lastly, wouldn't it be helpful if you always had these current analytics at your fingertips, and not just the raw dashboards, but meta dashboards that are telling you you do have an increase in non-revenue water or leakage. We are seeing infiltration slowly creep up in this particular zone or this particular catchment area. Are my pumps operating within my expected manufacturer limits? Are they starting to drift? Um, what is my system throughput, flow pressures, or really just any instantaneous or historical comparison for any aspect of your system, right? You have all of this data, right? You have this data at your utility. It may be coming from SCADA systems, maybe or LIMS, or for quality, or AMI for metering, or maybe just IoT for lots of remote sensor management, or I'm sorry, remote sensor monitoring. It's there, but what are you doing with it? Can you turn all that data into useful information that helps you drive operational decisions? So without reading this full thing, the insight value prop is really just about this live, living dashboard, sorry about that, this living system, um, with the kind of the meta objectives here at the bottom, right? It's first of all, federating all of your data into a single environment and utilizing all of those data sources. It's about making sure that you have a configurable business intelligence solution, with purpose-built analytics around your KPIs. It's really nice to see what has happened and what is happening for your flow monitoring and your pressure monitoring, but how you turn that into even more useful information, like water loss or water uptake. Um, of course, all about being scalable with a focus on the job to be done. This being as a SaaS or a cloud-based environment basically means that you don't have to think about any infrastructure whatsoever. All we need is to be able to access your data endpoints, and we take everything over there. And finally, right, it's like I said a couple of times, it's about maximizing your efficiencies, minimizing cost, minimizing waste, keeping a laser focus on the bottom line at all times. So a few challenges and how we really address these challenges is, first of all, there's frequently lack of visibility in aspects of system performance. As we saw in that first poll we talked about, what are you doing for business intelligence? What are you doing for observing key performance things? A lot of people said none, or they are doing it ad hoc, as needed. If it's an audit, if it's a compliance report, you name it. The beauty of this system is once you set it up, it's always available, it's always running, it's living, it's live, it talks to your models, so that you have the set points and boundary information for your planning workflows. Could go on and on and on. That kind of goes here into this third bullet, though, right? Is what is that painful process of doing this ad hoc, right? I've talked to several utilities where when they do have to do this ad hoc, they basically kind of turn off their Outlook, turn off their Slacks or Teams or whatever messaging tools they use, to go lock themselves in an office for a week, just to download, munge all the data, and get it compliance ready, right? There's also we know there's a lot of dirty data that comes out of these systems, and how do you scrub that data and have it compliant ready, or report ready, and on an ad hoc basis. It's a lot of work, right? Our system automates everything. All of the ingest, all the data scrubbing, everything is live, living at your fingertips. There are these purpose-built analytics and KPIs that I've mentioned a few times now. What is your non-revenue water? What's your rainfall-derived INI, or just your basic INI and more? How do you know that information at a glance? How do you share that information at a glance? Do you just wait for something to happen, or are you proactive, right? I think of an example in my personal life that is very analogous. It's like, if I could predict or action when and where my sprinkler system was going to bust and have a break, whether it's a head or just some line or some tree root growing around a line and reducing my flow and pressure, if I could have something that tell me that would solve my biannual headache of fixing whatever thing broke in my sprinkler system at that time. It's no different for scaling that up from a water utility. It's like, don't wait for something to happen, because it's going to be more work. You're going to have more downtime, and you're going to probably have to drop whatever you're planning on doing, to go action this. Being ahead of that curve is much more efficient. It allows you to plan these activities and allows you just to have a very, very shareable dashboard, a shareable system where everybody's on the same page. So really just, asking some questions around these points that I just talked about. What if anybody in your team, anybody could access any system-wide data and see this common operating picture? What if you could have these purpose-built KPIs ready at anybody's fingertips? Create the views and dashboards that are meaningful to you. There are different people who care about different parts of information in the utility. Having this very configurable allows you to set up those views that are meaningful to each person at each point in time. And so on and so forth. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just to keep us on time here. But as Hunter mentioned, right, of course, all this information will be shareable afterwards. So here's a poll question number 2 as Hunter loads this up. Is system performance reporting important to your work in the utility? It'll be interesting to see what our results look like based on the first question, where a lot of us are not really doing anything. So if this is really interesting, as you guys are seeing this as I'm coming in, because it's kind of counter to the first question that we looked at, or it's actually kind of complementary, however you want to look at it. Right in the first poll, everybody was, I think a majority of us were saying, we don't really automate our systems. We do it ad hoc. We don't have purpose-built solutions. But at the same time, I can see out of this poll that a lot of us are working with reports or need to build reports or need this data somehow or another for reports. And kind of need that ultimate final output. That's not to say that you might not have some ad hoc workflows already pre-built to pull data into your reporting tools for when you need to do these things, whether it's Excel or something else. But I just think this is interesting. We've got a lot of folks here who have some degree of reporting that they have to do. Our question, of course, at the end is, wouldn't it be nice if all of this could be ready, locked and loaded for you to just download, ingest into a report, and off you go? I'm going to go ahead and close this down and carry on. Lose those controls. So make sure I didn't skip a slide here. There we go. This is really just a quick little visual to show really how our tools all kind of work together. And I just think of it in this continuum workflow as a person in a utility or wearing any hat, really, is what has happened, what's happened in the past, what can we learn from it, what is happening now, what's happening today. What do we need to be aware of? How might we want to modify our operational decisions? How can I take this information and roll it to key stakeholders or compliance groups or turn it into community reports? All the way down to what will happen. And this is how our product suites really sort of fall together, is Insight and Asset for very different workflows are about what has happened and what is happening in the world today, right? What are my flow metrics or my pressure metrics? When I had that burst a month ago, what information can I look at prior to that would have helped me to predict or anticipate that a burst may be brewing? Was it a large burst? Was it a small burst? So on and so forth. To the current stage, and then really tying these tools together into the simulation tools, right? Bringing this information across for my set points, my boundary points, my patterns, you name it, to better anticipate what will happen. How can I plan for better outcomes based on all of this historical information? How can I leverage this historical information to get the best outcomes out of my planning tools, all within the Innovyze portfolio? So that's just sort of a quick meta around, how our tooling all works together. So looking at the Insight key features, we've got sort of a spoke wheel thing here of real-time analytics, right? Is a key thing. What is my lift station? Was my pump station throughput? What are my pump runtimes, my pump performance, the KPIs that I've talked about several times? And then getting that into these dashboards here, these dashboarding tools, right? So that I have some workflow automation. I want all of this to be automated. I want data to be coming in the door automatically. I want my dashboards to update automatically. I want my tools to run automatically. I'll discuss in a moment just some example tools that we're talking about. And I really want this to talk to the other tools that I use on a daily basis, my analytics tools, my compliance tools, my reporting tools, you name it. So that's just kind of like a very high level. Hunter is going to show some actual buttonology as we get into the app after my prelude here. But I just showed this slide just to show a lot of the types of data that we use. We use SCADA data, we can ingest rain disk data, rain gauge data. IOR, IoT is an acronym I prefer, but that's just if you have dispersed pressure sensors or even acoustic sensors, right, that are temporary throughout your system, we take that in and we can utilize that and we can analyze that as part of the KPIs. All of this is displayed in your network view. All this is generally time series data so that you can look at patterns, trends, and so on and so forth. Your AMR, your meter data, field data, or water quality data from your limb system. It doesn't matter, right? Like we can take all of this data and we can use it in any number of ways in this very, very configurable system to get to those KPIs or to get to those analytics, right? Again, what are the KPIs? What are the analytics that we're looking for at the end of the day? We're trying to get down to maximizing water quality, or quickly diagnosing water quality issues and seeing this in a very live system. What's all my past information? How's it compared to what's happening right now? Minimizing water loss, minimizing energy costs when possible, keeping your assets, inspected and keeping them, actionable, with the idea of making sure that you are ahead of pipe breaks. And then again, integrations with your model calibration workflows or your modeling tools, and making sure that everything is regulation or regulatory compliant, especially making sure that your data are compliance ready, analytic ready, and so on. So as I mentioned, like what are some sample analytics that we can do? This is just a sample, right? There's quite a range of things that are possible in this solution. What is your non-revenue water, right? What's your percent and your absolute non-revenue water? What is it at a DMA level or a district meter area, as well as what is it system-wide? Really, along with that, what are your leakage indices? You may have low water loss in a smaller DMA of your system. You may have lower absolute loss, but you may have very high leakage. You may have much higher relative loss. Is it more important for your utility to go fix that zone, or is it more important for utility to just go focus on the higher absolute losses in other areas? What are your minimum nightly flows? What are things like localized and system-wide average pressures? And let's say you make some operational changes, right? And you're going to want to see very quickly in living dashboards how those changes impact your local and system-wide average pressures. What are your infiltration and inflows if you're in storm or sewer? What is your tank turnover or tank drawdown if you're in distribution systems. If you do have a burst, how long did it last? What was the total water loss at that burst? And you can quantify the dollar impact to your utility, based on your tariffs and rates. Things like pump station volumetric outputs. This isn't quite, analogous to just a day-to-day operation, but we just had a very large rain event, flash flood event in Denver, which is where I am, a few days ago, and we had some stormwater management systems that just didn't come on automatically as they were supposed to. This is not news to anybody. They're not a secret to anybody. This is all over the news. But this is the type of thing that you'd be like, hey, this system should have automatically come on, and we should automatically easily be able to track exactly how much water was being pumped out of this particular area. This happened to be a highway underpass, which closed for some time, because we have a pump station right there whose purpose-built job is to keep that area water-free in large rain events. You would want to know that information, right? If we're operating at full capacity for 45 minutes, what was our total volumetric output at that place? Whoops. So I'm going to time that back to just a little real-life example. And so on, pump runtime analytics, pump performance, CSO type of stuff. So I'm just about done here, but the idea is to wrap up and say, like, how do you answer these questions? We've sort of touched on this and circling back. Do you have BI solutions that tell you how you are doing today relative to yesterday? And is this going to help you predict what's going to happen tomorrow? Is this shareable? Is this compliance ready data? Do you spend a lot of time processing data, or is it pretty much ready at your fingertips and report ready when you need it? Can this be automated? Let's see, what other ones would I want to highlight? What tools do you use to proactively find issues rather than waiting for large failures or violations, right? Using the what has happened and what is happening information, along with potentially some of your simulation tools. Like, do you have some kind of insight into how to maximize your efficiencies and minimize events, right? It's all about sort of minimizing loss, minimizing waste, minimizing events. I'm going to go into one final poll question, and then I'm going to turn it over to, well, I have one little wrap up slide, but then I'm going to turn it over to Hunter and say here, what are your biggest obstacles? And Hunter, if you want to go ahead and kick this off, there you go. What are your biggest obstacles to having system performance dashboards with these KPIs that I've been talking about, like measuring non-revenue water, INI, pump performance, throughputs, and so on and so forth. Seeing an interesting collection. I think I'm kind of glad that we're not seeing a whole lot of votes in category 2 here, although I shouldn't bias any voting. But the ranges from the obstacles, I should say, are starting from 0, right? Getting the data just into my hands, ready to use, to the final thing that, like, hey, we're really not in any sort of a danger zone. Like, we don't have compliance issues. We don't have water scarcity, so we don't care if maybe we are losing water through some of our distribution systems, and so on. So I think we'll go ahead, and I just think that's kind of interesting to see people's perspectives on that. And then let me just clean us up here and say, hey, now Hunter's gonna show us some of the application in real time. Easy web use interface, common operating picture, and very configurable analytic ready solution. So Hunter, take us away.
Appreciate that, Pete. We'll go ahead and see if I can successfully share my screen, which is always really 50-50 at this point. Don't want to do that. Screen share. All right. And Pete, can you let me know when you can see Info
It is. It just
360?
popped up, so I think
All
we're good to go.
right. Perfect. Well, Pete, really appreciate that overview, that introduction. Those poll questions were something that wasn't extremely surprising, but it was really nice to see some of our thoughts and beliefs confirmed through those numbers, trying to get that data to be more accessible. And I think that's one thing that Info360 Insight, being in the cloud, being on the AWS platform, really helps us, because you're no longer having to manually upload that data, manually get that data into a usable form. Once you establish that connection, it's automatically in near real time is being uploaded. So as you can see, when you open Info360 Insight, it is a fully web-based application. So when you open it up, it's just going to take you to an overview dashboard, a little preview of what we're going to go into. We have a customized workspace set up as your dashboard. So if there are forms of information that you are particularly interested in, whether it's leakage, whether it is what's going on in a certain DMA or overview of your system, you have the ability to customize this dashboard in order to pull that information out. Within the interactive map, this is going to be really the first preview of where your hydraulic model and that SCADA data are actually working together, because as you can see here, as I click on the different assets, this is actually being published from your InfoWater Pro model, giving you an interactive model within the cloud platform so that you can actually pull where that sensor information is located with respect to your hydraulic model. If someone that is just trying to pull a quick view of what's going on in a sensor in an area, all they need to do is come over to the interactive map, and you have the ability to pull open those historical chartings. So this is really beneficial for people that maybe aren't the most technical with the hydraulic modeling side. We've provided a place that they can just come in, get a brief view of what is going on in your system. As we can see, we've simulated data being ingested, being brought in real time. So you can really get a snapshot of what's going on in these different sensors. One of the areas that Pete really touched on, and something we think is important, is being able to view that data that's being brought in. You're collecting all of this data, it's being dropped somewhere. And what we've realized, that it's not a lack of data that people are running into, it's really lacking the tools that makes that data usable and making it so that it isn't a very manual process in order to use this data. You want this data, I think Pete said it a couple times, at your fingertips, just ready to go, ready to use. And the workspace section of Info360 Insight really allows you to do that. With these workspaces, they are completely customizable. So you can have one set up for your operations team. You can have one set up for your modelers. You can have one set up just for pressure gauges. We've got a couple different workspaces set up here that give you a little bit of a preview of how you could set these up. So we have one set up specifically looking at an overview of everything that is going on within a specific DMA in your system. So what this is going to do is it's really just going to give you an overview of the information that you set up for that specific DMA. If you wanted to look at the different pressure sensors, maybe you set up a pattern. We'll talk a little bit more about the patterns in a little bit when we dive a little bit deeper into the tools. But really, this workspace is giving you an overview of everything that is going on within that DMA, whether it's pump performance, setting up a tank operating range, maybe looking at a specific pump flow rate. I think one of the really strong points that you can use in here is setting up these pressure gauges with operating ranges, and then even leaving notes to operators so that when you open this up, your eyes instantly see one is highlighted red out of the operating range, and then leaving notes so that people know what to do. In the event that these are running out of different ranges, you can set up different sensors within one workspace where you're looking at flow rates or pressures. All of this, can be provided in one workspace. This is one example of how workspaces can be used, just looking at the overview of a section, but you can set these up to look at specific information. If you know that your system has some leakage issues, and this is something that you want to be able to look at, you want to really be able to dive deeper into, have the ability to set up workspaces that just specifically look at the leakage tools that we have provided, whether it's the non-revenue water within a mass balance or using the AWWA calculation for the infrastructure leakage index to really be able to dive deep into what is going on in your system. You could have these set up for multiple sections. You could have an overview. You can really make this be geared towards how the information you want to pull out of your system. And from those poll results, we did see that a lot of people were using either none, or were using one of the more generalized tools like a Power BI, one of those tools that are more specific for data, but not necessarily for hydraulic modeling or for water systems. And so a lot of those tools that people are using have the ability to create workspaces, to create dashboards. So what sets Info360 Insight apart from some of those others, in my opinion, is really the purpose-built tools that are set up to they're purpose-built tools that are usable for the water industry. They were built with water modeling in mind. So within here, as you can see, you can set up a mass balance for different systems. And this is really where you can use your engineering knowledge to break down your system into different DMAs, configure it to where it's pointing at different sensors for the different information. You set up a sensor for the inflow, the outflow, the storage, and the billing data. And all of that information is going to provide you with that non-revenue calculation that we looked at in the dashboarding capabilities. So this is just an example of how you can look at non-revenue water. I know where Pete and I are located, we're both based out of Denver, Colorado. Each year that passes, getting less and less of usable water, and really we need to make sure that the water that we are able to use is getting through your system effectively. So really want to keep that non-revenue water to a minimum where possible, especially if you're living in places that have drought conditions, that are living in a water scarcity, which is really becoming more and more places. So the non-revenue water calculator using the mass balance is really going to look at just the overall percentage of water that is leaving your system. But as we know, larger systems, larger DMAs are going to tend to leak more than smaller DMAs or smaller zones, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are operating less efficiently. So what you have the ability to do is look at the infrastructure leakage index, and what that's actually doing is it's looking at your current daily loss, and it's comparing to what you would expect in a healthy system, and it is giving you a way to compare different sized networks, different sized DMAs. And so this tool can really let you look at more of a one-to-one basis. And so the patterns are exactly how they sound. It's looking at your information, using your live SCADA data in order to create diurnal patterns. What's really nice about this tool is you can create them in Info360 Insight, and you can actually pull them into your hydraulic model in order to use those within InfoWater Pro. And so the tools that we've been showing so far are the purpose-built tools that the Innovyze team really thought were important of pulling out of your live SCADA data. Now, what we've also provided is the custom analytics. And what's really nice about this tool is if the water experts that you guys are, if there is additional information, additional KPIs, additional analytics that you would like to pull out of your system, we've provided a tool that allows you to do that. So you are not limited to the tools that we have provided. You have the ability to use your sensor data and mathematical functions to come together to pull out those additional KPIs. So one of the things that Pete mentioned was being able to calculate tank turnover. And so even though that tool and that analytic is not something that we have within Info360 Insight, we provide you a place that you can pull that information out, and you can use this for analytics as complicated as tank turnover, or something as simple as just wanting to compare or wanting to calculate the efficiency of a pump. As you can see, this is a much more basic mathematical function, but all of these can be derived, can be pulled out of your system using the custom analytics tool. And as you can see, there are different functions that you can use along with simple math, looking at the average, the highest, the if then, and the lowest. And so that's a little tour around the tools, the workspaces, really what sets Info360 apart because of the purpose-built KPIs that were made for water modeling in mind. And another item that is always important is knowing what's going on in your system in real time and near time so that you can respond to incidences. Info360 gives you the option of setting up alerts for your system so that as that information is coming in, the people that are going to be responsible with responding or making sure that your crews are getting out to the site are getting that information as quickly as possible. And with these, you have the ability to really drill these down to pull out the information, the KPIs, the information that they need to be based on, because nowadays really we're all getting hit with notifications, whether they're emails, text messages, phone calls, all of the above all the time. So the last thing we want is this notification just to be thrown on top of everything else that you're getting inundated with. We want to make sure that when these are created, that they're information that you know when this gets to you, this is important. And so by using physical, virtual sensors, as well as or functions and setting those operating ranges, you can really dial these in to make sure that they are important and are telling you information that allow you to respond to incidences even faster, getting these in real time or near real time. And so those were the features of Info360 Insight that we really wanted to go over, giving you an overview of how really with that data that you already have available, you can really take it further. You can take that data further. You can pull out those analytics. You can have a tool that gives you those real-time updates without a lot of manual processing. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for now. Pete, if you want to throw up that last slide, and we can go ahead and dive into any questions that people might have. So we've got 15 minutes. People feel free to ask your questions.
Yep. And I'm actually impressed. We hit it exactly at 10:45, which was our objective. Chat and QA has actually been pretty quiet. Although I'm trying to get here to the end here, just so you guys have our info. If there are any questions, go ahead and throw them in there. But we are done with our primary content. We will share this recording later in our webinar library. And
yeah, and with
it's
those
pretty quiet group.
yeah. And Pete has thrown our email addresses up there. If anything comes to you later or have questions, please feel free to throw them an email. And I love it when I can stall just long enough for a question to come in. How difficult is it to add new data streams / manage existing, etc.? Do you want to start with that one, Pete? And I'll go ahead and add any info?
It's actually really, really easy. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show you, because why not? Because we've got time and it's quiet. So here is just a little demo account. Hunter, are you still seeing my screen over here?
I am. Yep.
Okay, it's sorry, it doesn't give me a little red box like I'm
Yep.
used
Yep.
to. So here's a bunch of sensors or data streams that I have configured, right, for this particular environment. I can just add a new one interactively very easily by typing in the SCADA sensor ID. I can give it a user-friendly name. You know, I can say what type of sensor it is, the units I can specify depending on the type associated with an asset. Really, only a couple of these things are mandatory for me to be able to use the system. So super easy to configure on the fly. If you want, there is another, I should say if you want, there's just another option here where you can do a bulk sensor creation. And then what you can do is pick up a bunch of sensors from your SCADA system directly and upload them via CSV. So that's the second way that it's really easy to do this on the fly. And then the third one is you can actually upload a whole bunch of SCADA data or any time series data, doesn't have to be SCADA, sorry, through our upload data workflow. And that again allows you to take a bunch of static time series data in CSV format and upload it directly. So really easy. And of course I could delete these on the fly too. If I say, I don't want that one, or it's noise or something like that, you can get it out of there.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is once once the sensor configuration is established and you're pointing the connections to where it's pulling in the data, it's going to start, if you have that live data connection, that's when it's going to start pulling it in. So really, once you've got the sensors created or created that RFI, it will start pulling that in manually. Or sorry, automatically, not manually.
Yep. There's one more question that came in here. I was actually trying to find, I do have some data that the question I should say here is, we have manual data like static water levels, water quality. We like to graph side by side with well production. Do you have anything set up for this type of data? We can absolutely do that. I don't have that in this particular environment. It'd take me a second to remember where I have that set up, but we can follow up with you, you know, after this. Pretty quick just to show you where we have some static uploaded data, also a bunch of like water quality data that you can then put side by side with your wells. Absolutely. Kind of purpose built for that type of stuff.
100%. That's really where those customizable workspace and making sure you're having that, you can set up that information one time, and then when the information comes in, you just have an updated, updated dashboard. And for who you contact when you get the recording, it's my understanding it should be sent out automatically to your email. But if it doesn't, feel free to reach out to myself or Pete, and we will go ahead and make sure that that gets over to you. All really good questions. Give it another minute or two, see if we've got some more coming in. We've still got plenty of participants hanging out till the end, so I know people have questions. Even though I trust our presentation skills, there's no way we answered every question.
No, I mean I had to fly through pretty fast, you know, to keep us on talk. Hey, you've got our info here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Someone asks, what's our favorite feature? My favorite feature is the custom analytics piece. That really kind of ties back to, let me go to these things. This one. Right, you can really build all of these analytics or versions of them using our custom analytic tool set. What I like about it is that it's very configurable. So let me see what I have set up here. It's very configurable, i.e., this is probably not the best example here. I'm trying to find some specific things that I was looking at. I'll just open this one anyways for fun. So this is a extremely basic example where we're just adding an inline pressure correction constant. This is for when my physical sensor is actually offset from a discharge valve, and so I want to take account that vertical distance in my pressure correction for the additional head. But these are like this is very configurable, and so what I can do is I can create this analytic and I get my pressure correction output, but then I can clone this and reuse it 100 different times and just add either some different coefficients. I could add different inputs. This is kind of sort of one of the more basic environments. But here's one thing I do want to say is keep your eyes open, because we definitely plan on doing a deep dive into the custom analytics in a following webinar where we can show you how you can really start to make like super interesting, very, very specific to your utility analytics like infiltration and inflow, which is kind of one of the harder ones to build, honestly, because you don't necessarily have a single sensor or a point sensor that's going to tell you here's what my infiltration and inflow is. So anyways, this is this tools area is really where you get to the big KPIs in your section, right? So you can get to my oh, hasn't calculated yet. I can get to my non-revenue water. I can get to my leakage indices. I can get to my using the other tools, the ILI. But this tools button here is where you get to the really interesting meat of the application. The workspaces and dashboarding are all around the common operating picture, showing everybody, showing everybody what's going on. Everybody can see what are my DMA burst volumes, what is my zonal, what are my zonal leakage indices. Sorry, it loads a little bit slow when Zoom is using my GPU. Waiting. What is my system-wide usage? Is the trend going up or down? Are there clear seasonal trends? This is something that I showed before. What is our in a previous webinar? I think we back in February. Like what is my zonal leakage, right? So I'm looking here at a specific DMA at my utility, and I can see that the leakage is just crawling up and up and up and up and up over time. This is probably correlated to seasonal usage with irrigation, especially in this part of the country. But this is a very relevant trend that I want to keep my eyes on, right? I do see that usage is going up. I see that leakage is going up. The next thing that I would want to do on this that I thought I had in here was also to be what's my non-revenue water part of that, right? If I have this information. So sorry, I could go on and on forever about those cool things, but you get the idea.
And I think that custom analytics tool was the tool, before we had it in there, that people were asking about the most, wondering, perfect, we can look at leakage, but what if there's information that we want to pull out of our system that's not, provided inherently in Insight? And I think it really just took that ability to pull the analytics and the information out of your system to the next level.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Cool. Looks like things have kind of settled down.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, thank you. Please don't hesitate again to reach out if we can follow up, answer any just one-off questions. Whoops, there we go. And keep the conversation going with you guys. And look forward to our next water talk. Again, like we will start to deep dive on some more of these custom analytics and how you can really build these things and templatize them for use in your utility.
Yep. Yeah, just what Pete said. Thank you everybody for your time. And Pete, thank you for joining us today. Really, always appreciate your insight on
Always a
everything.
pleasure.
All
Always
right,
a pleasure.
take
All right,
care.
see everybody.
Bye.